Have you ever thought about who the real rebels of the wizarding world are? What if I told you that it's not the Death Eaters or even the Order of the Phoenix? In today's video, you will find out why goblins are the most dangerous and underestimated force in the magical universe. Goblins are an ancient and intelligent race in the world of Harry Potter. In the films, they seem like strict, greedy bankers guarding vaults in Gringotts with an iron grip. Sure, they're grumpy and unwelcoming, but they don't seem like a real threat. Even young wizards manage to outsmart them and sneak into their heavily secured bank. But what if I told you that goblins were never meant to be mere background characters? History remembers them not as passive vault keepers, but as fierce revolutionaries who shook the wizarding world to its core. These small but formidable creatures have launched uprisings, waged wars, and defied magical authorities for centuries. So hold on to your wallets, because the Goblin Rebellion is about to begin. No one knows exactly when goblins first appeared in the magical world, but one thing is certain. They have been around for over 1,000 years. By the time Hogwarts was founded, goblins had already established a thriving culture and strong ties with wizards. How do we know this? One of Hogwarts' legendary artifacts, the Sword of Gryffindor, was crafted by the Goblin King Ragnuk I. The weapon was so magnificent that Ragnuk didn't want to part with it. He insisted that Godric Gryffindor had stolen it, leading to one of the first major conflicts between goblins and wizards. Over the centuries, goblins and wizards coexisted, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Wizards never saw goblins as equals. Maybe it was because of their appearance, short, long-fingered with sharp features. Maybe it was fear of their intelligence and craftsmanship. Either way, goblins found a way to thrive despite discrimination. In 1474, a goblin named Gringotts founded the most powerful financial institution in the magical world, Gringotts Bank. Unlike house elves, who were forced into servitude, goblins carved out a position of power. They controlled the wizarding economy and wielded a unique kind of goblin magic, one that didn't require wands. Goblins aren't just smart and hardworking, they are also fiercely proud and deeply resent injustice. And when they feel wronged, they don't stay silent. Throughout history, goblins have led multiple uprisings against wizard kind. Every time wizards imposed unfair laws or tried to restrict their rights, goblins responded with rebellion. The Ministry of Magic, fearing their power, passed a strict law forbidding non-humans from using wands, but even that wasn't enough to suppress them. One of the earliest revolts was led by none other than Ragnuk I. Still enraged over losing Gryffindor's sword, he launched an armed rebellion against the wizarding world. It took the combined force of wizard armies to put it down. But that was just the beginning. Over the centuries, goblins staged at least 7 major revolts. Even during the events of Harry Potter, secret goblin factions were rumored to be working against the Ministry, planning sabotage and uprisings in the shadows. Goblins have always had their leaders, some seeking justice, others revenge. Here are some of the most notorious figures in goblin history. Gurg the Filthy, a 17th century goblin ruler who led a violent rebellion after young wizards humiliated him by dunking him into a lake. What started as a petty insult turned into a full-scale war. Godrod Callous Hand, a goblin assassin responsible for the deaths of multiple wizards. When he was finally captured, his fellow goblins rallied to free him, sparking another uprising. Narlak, a goblin gangster in 1920s America running an underground bar. A key figure in Fantastic Beasts, he proves that goblins never lost their edge. Bodrig the Crooked, the leader of the Goblin Brotherhood, an organization demanding the right to use wands. His protests escalated into riots, shaking the magical government. So next time you see goblins hunched over their desks at Gringotts, remember, They are not just quiet bankers. They are warriors, rebels, and strategists, always watching, always waiting for their next move. The question is, what happens when they finally strike again? The Ministry of Magic believed it had control over the wizarding world. It enforced its laws, dictated who could wield magic, and ensured that creatures like goblins remained in their designated roles. But goblins have long memories. Every injustice, every law restricting their rights, every humiliation, it all added up. And while wizards dismissed them as mere bankers, goblins were waiting, watching, preparing. Gringotts was more than a bank. It was a fortress, a labyrinth of tunnels, ancient vaults, and hidden passageways that no wizard had ever fully explored. Even Voldemort, the Dark Lord himself, underestimated it. When Harry Potter and his friends broke in, the goblins didn't chase them out of anger. It was something else. A test. A demonstration of power. And the Ministry didn't seem to understand what it meant. Wizardkind have often underestimated goblins, Bill Weasley once warned. He knew more than most, working closely with them as a curse-breaker. He spoke their language. He saw their resentment firsthand, but even he didn't know the full extent of their secret plans. Deep beneath Gringotts, older than the Ministry itself, lay something more than gold, something the goblins had kept hidden for centuries. It was called the Gauntlet of Ragnuk. Forged by the first Goblin King, it was said to grant its wearer the ability to command enchanted metal, not just swords and shields, but entire cities of iron and steel. The Ministry dismissed it as legend, goblin myths, nothing more. But legends often had roots in truth. And if the gauntlet was real, it meant the goblins held a weapon unlike anything the wizarding world had ever seen. Rebellions were nothing new. The 1612 Goblin Rebellion in Hogsmeade had nearly torn the wizarding economy apart. Gurg the Filthy, a notorious goblin leader, led his forces against the Aurors, refusing to surrender even when outnumbered. They have always been a problem, an old Ministry document stated. They cannot be allowed to believe they are equal to wizardkind. The Ministry thought it had crushed them. But goblins do not forget. What if all those past rebellions weren't failures? What if they were trials? Small battles meant to test wizarding defenses, probe weaknesses, gather intelligence. And what if the goblins had learned from their mistakes, refining their strategies over centuries? Unlike wizards, they had time. They didn't need to rush. The Ministry believed goblins had no allies. That was their biggest mistake. Goblins didn't need wands, but they understood magic. They knew its origins, its deepest secrets, and they weren't alone. Centuries ago, they had made pacts with other magical beings, centaurs, house elves seeking freedom, even a few disillusioned wizards who had grown tired of the Ministry's arrogance. Some of these alliances had faded, others had strengthened. One name kept appearing in old records, Bodrig the Crooked. A goblin revolutionary from the 19th century, he had nearly succeeded in securing wand rights for goblins. His movement had been crushed, but his ideas lived on. What if his followers never truly disappeared? What if they had simply gone underground, waiting for the right moment? The Ministry thought it was invincible. It had survived wars, Dark Lords, internal corruption. But what if its biggest enemy had been hiding in plain sight all along? If the goblins struck, they wouldn't do it through open battle. They didn't need to. They controlled the flow of wizarding wealth. With a single decision, they could plunge the entire magical economy into chaos. Gold was power, and power was what the Ministry had always feared losing the most. Perhaps the war had already begun, quietly, invisibly. Perhaps the goblins were already making their move, shifting pieces on the board while the Ministry remained blind. The wizards laughed at the idea of goblins being a true threat. But then again, wizards had always been foolish. And in the end, the ones who underestimate